Cottonwood Creek, Arizona Territory, 1883. Charlotte Pierce had learned over 3 long years exactly how a room could reject a person without ever saying a word out loud. She stood just inside the doorway of the Golden Spur Saloon on a Thursday evening in October, her crutch tucked under one arm, the polished wooden peg beneath her skirts settling unevenly on the warped floorboards, and watched every man in the room find somewhere else to look, somewhere safer, somewhere that didn't require deciding what to say to her. Conversations didn't stop. They just quietly closed ranks around her, a room deciding together, without a word passed between them, that acknowledging her presence for longer than a glance would cost something none of them wanted to pay. Nobody offered her a chair. Nobody offered her anything at all, not even the courtesy of acknowledging she'd walked in. She'd come only to collect payment on Silas Rourke's mended coat, and Silas himself wouldn't meet her eyes long enough to hand her the coins properly, dropping them onto the bar instead of into her palm, the way a man drops a coin for a beggar rather than pays a debt to a woman who'd sewn him an honest coat. Her hand rose to her chest, the old habit of steadying a breath that had gone shallow and quick, without her permission. Then, a chair scraped back at a corner table, loud enough in the sudden quiet that half the room turned to look. A cowboy she didn't recognize, dark curling hair beneath a weathered hat, a few days' road dust still on his duster coat, stood, pulled the second chair out from his own table, and looked at her like she was simply a woman standing in a doorway. Nothing more complicated than that. "Sit with me," he said, simply. The whole saloon went quiet in an entirely different way than it had a moment before. Before the piano, there had been horses. The Pierce family had bred and broken Mustangs on a spread west of town until Charlotte was 12, back before her father sold the herd and the land both to pay off a bad year, and she still remembered exactly how to talk low to a spooked animal, how to plant her feet and drop her voice into something a frightened creature could trust, a skill she hadn't needed in over a decade, folded away like a dress she'd outgrown but never quite thrown out. She'd played piano at the Golden Spur since she was 17, untrained but naturally gifted, the kind of player who could read a room's mood and match it before anyone realized that was what they'd wanted to hear. Men who couldn't carry a tune themselves would request the same 3 songs from her for months, just to hear her make something ordinary sound like it mattered. It had been, for 8 years, the one place in Cottonwood Creek where she felt entirely herself. The accident happened on a June afternoon 3 years back. A freight wagon's team spooked by a rattlesnake near the schoolhouse. 6-year-old Mary Kettleman frozen in the road directly in its path, too startled by the noise to move a single step. Charlotte hadn't thought about it, not the way people later insisted she must have. She'd simply moved, shoving the girl clear with both hands, and hadn't been fast enough to clear herself. The town had been grateful for a while. They brought food, sat vigil during the fever that followed, told her repeatedly how brave she'd been. But gratitude curdled fast once the crisis passed, and the discomfort of her presence remained. The crutch, the uneven gait, the visible reminder that safety was never as guaranteed as people like to pretend. She'd stopped playing piano the week she came back to town. Nobody had asked her to stop. Nobody had needed to. She could feel it in the way requests dried up, the way conversations paused a beat too long when she entered a room. There was a difference between a room going silent out of respect and a room going silent out of relief that you'd soon be leaving it. She took up sewing instead, steady, private work behind a closed shop door, work that asked nothing of anyone's careful, managed politeness. Jesse Calhoun had ridden into Cottonwood Creek 4 days earlier with a trail crew delivering 400 head to the rail depot, part of the steady traffic of Arizona cattle pushed north each season to meet the rail lines and the eastern markets waiting at the other end of them. And he knew exactly nobody's history in that town. The entire reason the evening went the way it did. He was 29, quiet in the way of a man who'd done most of his talking already and found it hadn't fixed much. 3 years before, in a Texas county he didn't discuss, his wife Rachel and the child she was carrying had died when a wagon overturned crossing a swollen creek. An accident, nobody's fault. The kind that leaves a man with nowhere to point his anger, excepted weather and luck, neither of which answers back. He'd buried her, and 3 weeks later buried the small wooden marker he'd carved for the child that never got a name, and rode out of that county before the ground had properly settled over either grave, telling himself it was practical to move on to where the work was. He knew, even then, it was really just easier to keep moving than to sit still with what he'd lost. He'd taken a corner table at the Golden Spur that Thursday, simply because it was quiet, nursing a whiskey he wasn't in any hurry to finish, when he noticed a woman standing in the doorway, being very deliberately not noticed by an entire room. He didn't know she'd once played that piano, gathering dust in the corner. He only saw what was actually in front of him, a woman with nowhere to sit in a room full of empty chairs. And something about that plain unfairness moved him before he'd fully decided to move. He hadn't planned to say anything at all. The chair was already scraping back before the thought had finished forming. She sat, because refusing would have meant standing in that doorway even longer, and because his face hadn't asked her to be grateful for the gesture. It had simply made it, the way a person holds a door. "Jesse Calhoun," he said, passing through with the Bar M herd, 400 head bound for the rail cars. "Charlotte Pierce," she said quietly, and waited for the question that usually followed. It didn't come. "You always collect debts in saloons?" he asked instead, nodding at the coins still sitting on the bar where Silas had left them. "Only from men too much of a coward to hand them over properly," she said, and heard her own voice come out sharper and more herself than it had in longer than she wanted to admit. Something almost like a laugh crossed his face. "I'll go collect them for you, if you'd like to see him flinch twice in one evening." "I can manage my own collecting, Mr. Calhoun." "Didn't say you couldn't," he said. "Said I'd enjoy watching." They talked for the better part of an hour. Cattle prices, the Arizona heat, a story about a green colt that had put him in a horse trough his first week on the Bar M. Ordinary conversation of a kind she hadn't been offered in 3 years. Conversation that assumed she was simply a person capable of finding things funny, not a situation to be managed. "You play?" he asked at one point, nodding toward the piano gathering dust in the corner. "Used to," she said, and left it there, waiting to see whether he'd push. "Shame," he said simply, and moved the conversation elsewhere. And she understood he'd read the closed door in her answer, and had no interest in forcing it. Nobody had done that either, not in 3 years. Most people either avoided the piano entirely, tiptoeing around it like a grave, or pushed at it with the well-meaning insistence of people convinced that forcing her back onto the bench would somehow fix what the accident had broken. When she finally stood to leave, he stood too, and didn't offer his arm, correctly reading that she hadn't asked for it. "Evening, Miss Pierce," he said. "Hope Cottonwood Creek treats you kinder than tonight suggested." She walked home, turning that sentence over the whole way, unable to remember the last time someone had noticed the unkindness at all, let alone said so plainly, as though it were simply a fact about the town, rather than a fact about her that needed managing. The Bar M's foreman needed extra hands through the fall roundup, and Jesse took the work. He came by the dress shop the following week with a torn shirt sleeve that didn't strictly need Charlotte's mending skills so much as it needed an excuse, and she recognized the excuse for exactly what it was and mended the sleeve anyway. Her leg had been fitted 18 months after the accident with a jointed wooden and leather prosthetic built by a traveling limb maker out of Prescott, one of a growing number of craftsmen who'd learned the trade fitting Civil War veterans 2 decades before and carried the skill west with the railroads, following demand created by mining accidents and farm machinery as much as the war ever had. It let her walk without the crutch on smooth ground, though stairs and uneven floors still demanded it. And she'd spent a year learning exactly how much weight to trust it with, how to shift her hip just so through a turn, before she trusted it in public at all. The fitting had cost more than 3 months of sewing work, borrowed against future orders and paid back slowly, one hemmed skirt at a time. Jesse asked about it directly, once, the 3rd week. He just asked, flat and easy, like he was checking on a fence post instead of a wound. "Does it ache?" "Some days," she said. "Less than people expect. More than I let on." "Fair enough," he said, and didn't press further, which she'd come to understand was simply how he handled most things that weren't his business to fix. What she didn't tell him was what the leg still cost her 2 years on. Not the money, though that hadn't stopped either, but the daily arithmetic of deciding which floors were safe, which invitations were worth the risk of stairs, which rooms she'd rather not enter at all. That ledger never balanced. She simply kept paying it, every single day, and had stopped expecting anyone to notice the bill. This story's already found its way to places I didn't expect when I sat down to write it. Brazil, Nigeria, India, the Philippines, corners of the world I'm only starting to learn. If Charlotte and Jesse are keeping you good company tonight, a like helps more than you'd think. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. Now, not everyone in Cottonwood Creek is glad to see Charlotte smiling again, and one woman in particular is about to make that very clear. Priscilla Hargrove ran the town's social committee the way some men ran cattle empires. And she had strong opinions about the Founders' Day dance, now 3 weeks off, and stronger ones still about the sight of a Bar M drifter spending his evenings at Charlotte Pierce's dress shop. "It isn't unkindness," she told the foreman's wife, in the flat, certain tone of a woman thoroughly convinced her own cruelty was concern. "It's simple practicality. A man ought to know what he's taking on before he takes it on. A cripple can't dance, can't run a household the way a whole woman can, and it's a mercy to say so plainly before feelings get further involved than they ought." Word reached Jesse within the week, delivered by his own foreman, with the awkward duty of a man passing along gossip he didn't fully endorse, but felt obligated to mention. "Just so you're not caught unaware," the foreman said. "Some in town think you're being kind to her out of pity. Others think you don't know what you're getting into." "And what do you think?" Jesse asked. The foreman considered it honestly. "I think Miss Pierce laughs more since you rode in than she has in 3 years I've known her. Seems worth something, whatever the rest of them are saying." Jesse turned that over the rest of the day, mending fence alone on the far side of the property, where he had time to think without company. He'd heard talk like Mrs. Hargrove's before, in the county he'd left, neighbors who'd meant well and said cruel things anyway, certain their own comfort was simply common sense, and he'd let that kind of talk push him out of a place once already. He found, turning it over now, no appetite for letting it push him out of this one. He didn't repeat any of it to Charlotte. She heard it herself 2 days later, standing behind a display of bolt cloth in the mercantile, while Mrs. Hargrove discussed the matter with another woman entirely unaware Charlotte was within earshot. Mercy, Mrs. Hargrove had called it. A mercy, to say so plainly, the sort of word that dressed itself up as kindness while doing the exact work of cruelty. Charlotte left without buying the cloth she'd come for, and spent that evening doing the arithmetic she'd sworn off 3 years before, measuring exactly how much of Jesse Calhoun's attention was genuine interest And how much was the kindness a decent man extends to something broken, the way he might feed a stray dog without ever intending to keep it. When he came by the shop the next afternoon, she was distant in a way he hadn't seen since their first evening at the Golden Spur. "Something happened?" he asked. "Nothing happened," she said, which was true in the narrowest possible sense and false in every other one. He didn't push that day. He'd gone quiet on someone before, once, and let silence make the decision instead of him. Watched it cost him nearly everything worth having. He wasn't about to make that mistake twice, not with this one, but he also knew better than to force a door open before she was ready to unlatch it herself. So he simply stayed a while longer than the visit called for, saying nothing, until the worst of her wariness had somewhere to settle. He found her 2 evenings later at the split-rail fence behind her shop, where she went most evenings to watch the sun drop behind the Bradshaw Range, the sky turning a deep, improbably gentle orange over the whole valley. "Somebody's been telling you I'm here out of pity," he said. Not a question. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I buried a wife and a child that never got born," he said, 3 years back in a creek crossing that shouldn't have killed anybody. "I've spent every year since making sure I never had anywhere solid enough under me to lose again. Told myself that was just how a drifter lives, like it was a philosophy instead of a way of hiding. Then I sat down across a table from a woman nobody in this town would look at. And for the first time in 3 years, I wanted to stay somewhere long enough to see what happened next." That's not pity, Charlotte. Pity doesn't make a man want to build something. It just makes him feel better about walking away. "You don't know what people are saying," she said, quiet, watching the last of the light go instead of looking at him. "What it costs being seen with me." "I know exactly what they're saying," he said. "My foreman already warned me. I came to the fence line instead of turning my horse around, if that answers the question you're actually asking." She was quiet a long moment, the sun nearly gone behind the mountains, the first stars starting to show over the ridgeline. "Mrs. Hargrove's going to make the dance difficult," she said finally. "For both of us, if you're seen with me there." "Then we better go anyway," Jesse said, not to prove anything to her. "Just because I'd like to dance with you, and I don't intend to let a woman with strong opinions about mercy talk either of us out of it." He didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them both a great deal more than an evening of stares before the week was out. The dance was held in the depot warehouse, cleared and swept and hung with lanterns for the occasion. The same depot that saw herds like the Bar M's 400 head push through every season on their way to the rail cars and the eastern markets waiting at the other end of the line. The whole town's fortune tied, one way or another, to that stretch of track. Founders' Day wasn't just another gathering in a town like Cottonwood Creek. For most families on outlying spreads, it was the one night of the year they dressed in their better clothes and danced under a roof. The single evening a hard-scrabble farming community set aside on purpose to remember there was more to living out there than work and dust and distance from everything familiar. Charlotte arrived on Jesse's arm in the blue dress she'd finished sewing 3 nights before, and felt the room do the same thing it had done at the Golden Spur. Conversations closing quietly around her presence, though this time Jesse's arm stayed exactly where it was. Mrs. Hargrove found them within the first quarter hour, moving through the crowd with the brisk purpose of a woman who had been rehearsing a line all week. "How lovely you could join us, Miss Pierce," she said, in a voice pitched for the several nearby ears it was clearly intended for. "Though I do wonder whether the dance floor's quite suited to your circumstances. We wouldn't want an accident." "We wouldn't," Jesse said, before Charlotte could answer. "Though I've noticed accidents mostly happen to people standing still, worrying too hard about what everyone's watching, instead of paying attention to what's actually in front of them. He looked at Charlotte. "Care to dance, Miss Pierce?" The band was mid-waltz when Jessie led her onto the floor and adjusted his stance without comment to match the rhythm her leg required. Shorter steps, weight held steady through the turns. Nothing about it apologetic or careful in a way that drew attention to itself. She had not danced in 3 years. She had not expected to remember how, and for the first turn or two, her whole body braced for a misstep that never came. His hand steady at her waist the entire time, adjusting a half beat before she needed him to, rather than asked her. By the third psalm, she'd stopped bracing entirely and simply danced. And for the length of that waltz, Cottonwood Creek watched a woman they'd spent 3 years managing instead of knowing, and found they didn't quite have the vocabulary left to keep doing the former. The trouble started with fireworks meant to mark the evening's close, and a supply wagon team tied loosely outside the depot that hadn't been warned to expect the noise. The team bolted down Elm Street directly toward the schoolhouse steps, where 3 children too young to know better were sitting to watch the fireworks. The street emptied of grown men, fast enough that nobody quite reached the horses in time. Nobody except Charlotte, who moved into the street on legs that had every reason to fail her and didn't, planted herself directly in the team's path, and spoke to the lead horse in the low, steady voice her father had taught her before she'd ever touched a piano key, before any of this town had decided what to make of her. Her leg buckled once under the strain of holding her ground against 900 pounds of frightened horse, and she felt it go, and held anyway, weight thrown onto the good leg and sheer stubbornness. The same stubbornness that had once shoved a 6-year-old clear of a runaway wagon without stopping to calculate the cost. She didn't think about the leg at all in that moment. Didn't think about 3 years of careful arithmetic over which floors were safe and which invitations weren't worth the risk. She just did the thing her hands still remembered how to do, the way a body remembers a skill long after the mind has stopped trusting it. The team stopped, 4 feet from the children. Jessie reached her half a second later, breathing hard, and found her already stroking the horse's foam-flecked neck, her hands as steady on the bridle as they'd ever been on a needle and thread. The street had gone entirely silent behind them, Mrs. Hargrove included, standing near the depot doors with nothing composed left in her expression at all. Mary Kettleman's own mother was among the small crowd that had gathered, and she was the first to move, crossing the street to take Charlotte's arm, without a word, without the careful guilt she usually carried into every interaction between them, just steadying her, plainly, the way a neighbor steadies a neighbor. Nobody in town brought up Mercy again after that night, at least not within Charlotte's hearing. Mrs. Hargrove never spoke another word against either of them, though she never quite managed an apology either. She simply stopped, which in a woman like that was its own kind of admission. Jessie turned down the next cattle drive that came through and took a permanent position at the Bar M instead, the first solid ground he'd let himself stand on in 3 years. He wrote to Rachel's mother that winter, the first letter he'd sent since the funeral, and told her he'd found someone he intended to build a life with, and that he thought Rachel would have liked her considerably. He didn't know if that was true. He needed all the same to say it, needed to set something down he'd carried so long he'd nearly stopped feeling the weight of it. They married the following spring at the same depot warehouse where half the county had watched him lead her onto a dance floor nobody had expected her to reach. The Golden Spurs piano, long gathering dust in its corner, found its way back into regular use once word got around that Charlotte Calhoun still remembered every song she'd ever played. Though now, when men requested their old favorites, they looked her in the eye while they asked, the way they should have all along. I keep thinking about how easy it would have been for Jessie to just not. Nobody would have blamed him. He didn't know her, didn't owe her anything. could have finished his whiskey and ridden out with the herd 4 days later like nothing happened. That's what everyone else in that saloon did every single night for 3 straight years. Good people, most of them, who would have been horrified to hear themselves called unkind, and who managed it anyway, one averted glance at a time. He just pulled out a chair instead. That's it. That's the whole story, really. Everything after was just Cottonwood Creek slowly catching up to something Jesse already knew the first night, sitting across a table from a woman nobody else in the room would look at. Thank you, truly, for riding with me today. Until next time, friend.